talk with you guys a little bit tonight. Some kind of interesting things have happened. Some really interesting things have happened. Um, our internet was out for a week or something, and that was weird and not very helpful for us because that's. Oh, I'm sideways again. I knew it, man. All right, here, how's this? That's a little better. Still kind of dumb and narrow. I don't know why that happens. I set the phone up the same way every time, and sometimes it's sideways like that. So, my plan, of course, was to perform a little bit tonight, but I'm definitely not. I have a sore throat and I don't want to sing. So, we're gonna try to do that in a few days. And so instead, I remembered that it's going okay. No, um, which is interesting, that name, because that's kind of what we're going to talk about, the importance of nothingness is or the function, I guess, actually, of the absolute, which in my ontology, I guess, is the all, really. It's that which sustains all of creation is its opposite, the antinomical force. Uh, so the other thing is that I know that I had said that I was going to do the reincarnation reveal at Ain't Soft. That's awesome. That's awesome, man. You should put that on a t-shirt for sure. Ain't Soft, though. Get it? That's great, man. So I said I was going to do that at 3,000 subs, and I did for my patrons. And I'm still not going to tell you the whole story here. I'm not going to tell you guys how I came to the conclusion exactly. I'll talk a little bit about it. And I also want to preface it by saying that, it's not like I believe this with absolute certainty. I think that only the madman is absolutely certain, and that when it comes to matters of spirit, metaphysics, even politics, or anything, subjective certainty is not wise. Belief is the death of intelligence. So, in my case, I was sort of bombarded by coincidences and, just synchronicities, really, to such an extent that I just could not really come up with any other satisfactory explanation for what I was experiencing. It really strongly seemed to be like the universe was insisting on this idea. And so, but before we talk about that, I want to mention that the first video for my ritual magic course is getting uploaded tonight. So progress is being made on that. The second video I have recorded, but I think I decided the lighting is too bad, so I'm just going to re-record it real quick. We'll probably get that posted tomorrow. And so if you sign up for that course in the next 48 hours before July 1st, I'm going to add an extra hour of one-on-one tutelage. So if you need individual assistance in developing your practice or understanding something, it'll be an extra hour. And then also the video that we're gonna upload tonight is the California meets Amazon Chantakuru, which is a giant palm grub in a California style wrap that I made. That was awesome. So yeah, really excited about the ritual magic course. I think it's going to be really great, and we're going to do a lot of variations on like the lesser banishing ritual of the pentagram. For example, in the traditional archangelic invocation part of the ritual, it's Michael and Gabriel and Raphael, and so there are spirits in the shamanic, the ayahuasquero tradition, that sort of correspond to those archangels, and so we'll learn a bunch of different versions, incorporating different elements, different traditions. We'll look at casting a, what's up, man? a magical circle for ayahuasca ceremony, but using some of the techniques of the Hermetic tradition. And I think that that's what this stuff should really be about at this point. You know, people talk about cultural appropriation, but I think that's really racist. Just the idea of it, you know, I think that the best techniques and the best practices are going to be derived in a syncretic fashion from diverse traditions, and that's how we're going to get the most mileage. So I guess, the reason, by the way, that I was prompted to do this reveal tonight is that I'm working on. Well, I guess I should do this first. So I was reading this book, the Book of Thoth. Just at random, I happened to pick it up, and well before I ever encountered this book, I had these visions, and this is one of the things that's so interesting to me about this idea of gnosis, that we can come to spiritual knowledge that is actually knowledge. It's not just a belief. It's like, you know, metaphysics have substantive reality in the same way that physics does, and the rules and laws are the same, actually. The realm of spirit is just a subtle level of energy. It's just it's sort of like the subatomic realm, only it's more directly a manifestation of consciousness, I guess. In fact, nice. In fact, I've been trying to find language to describe this idea of symmetry that has been plaguing me, that I feel like can describe synchronicities. It can explain on a material basis why it is that we have signs, and then you know, something happens that makes those signs appear to be precognitive after the fact, you know, substantiating the signs, right? It's not that it isn't a communication from the universe, but everything has a natural cause. Everything has some kind of mechanistic basis in order to manifest it on this plane of reality. And so this idea of symmetry that's imbued in the wiring under the board, I've really been hung up on it. So I started researching supersymmetry, and guess what? That's basically a description of how this thing that I have been trying to find language to describe actually materializes. It's just supersymmetry. It's how supersymmetry in the subatomic plane reflects itself on the macroscopic plane. So that was a bit of a diversion, but the specific idea that I was thinking about here is that, you know, I had this vision of like, hey, thank you so much, man. Yeah, we definitely do appreciate support. Having the electricity out for a few days, it was actually really bad timing. I know I'm a little scattered tonight, but I'm very, very sick, so I appreciate you guys bearing with me. And there's a hell of a lot on my mind. But if you've been following the channel for a while, you know that I've been trying to go out into Shuar territory. My health kind of stopped that plan, and also finances. Things have just gotten hella bumpy. I think of this thing in life as like volatility. It's like, you know, the same kind of volatility that Bitcoin experiences is, you know, kind of how when you live your life the way that I do and you're a very mercurial person, you experience a lot of volatility. And so what I'm getting at here is that we may have finally found a benefactor that will allow us to go to Shuar territory finally in the next couple of weeks. And I think I've decided that I don't care whether my health can tolerate it or not, because I think that deep in the jungle, I will find the solution for my health issues. I know that I will, in fact. Also, by the way, I have a bunch of crazy jungle plants sitting around the house. I'm going to make a video about how to make a tea that will cure anything according to the Quechua here soon. So at any rate, we're hoping it comes through. We're not sure, but we may finally go and see the Shwar. So back to the main thrust of this narrative. So I had this vision of how nothingness became conscious, and that spark of light. I mean, I made a video about how I think that the Lucifer myth was literally demonizing consciousness itself. That was the real purpose of it. That's what's really being described there. And the thing about myth and metaphor is that even if we don't consciously understand the deeper meaning that's being communicated, part of our mind does. Ayahuasca told me this one time when I was staring at visions after days and days of drinking ayahuasca that were just all gobbledygook, that meant nothing, made no sense. And I was complaining to Pachamama, that I'm like, I'm tired of all this gobbledygook visions. And she said, just because you don't consciously understand, the mind works in symbols. It doesn't mean that the subconscious mind is still receiving information, basically. And I thought that was a really good answer. I was like, wow, Pachamama, you're pretty impressive, lady. So that's, the purpose of this myth. And so this nothingness that is the source of the all, it's like also the source of paradox, like, because the universe is a reflective process, like the underlying structure of it is based upon reflection. Each part contains the whole, right? That's like that holographic theory of the universe as mind, and assuming that the mind is also holographic, and Terrence and Dennis McKenna wrote a book about this called The Invisible Landscape that is hit or miss, but it's still worth reading. So at any rate, that's how paradox got imbued into everything. And so one of the conditions of the laws that sustain creation is that this nothingness always exists. Looks like we just lost our internet for a second, but I'm back. Okay, where were we? Okay, so this absolute is nothing, and it has to always exist in order to sustain creation. And the purpose of creation is that all of these potentialities that are facilitated by the existence of this absolute that is nothingness, that's like what facilitates their existence. I'm not doing the best job of explaining it, but it's not even the point. The point is that I had this idea that's described in what I'm about to read to you in my head since I can remember. And this is the sort of thing that happened that compelled me to consider that I was the reincarnation of this person, even though I'm not entirely convinced that reincarnation is a thing. And there are other explanations for my ability to recall, I could remember like entire chapters of the book before I ever read them, of several of his books, and a lot of stuff happened. Like I said, if you want to hear the full 2-hour story, it's on my Patreon. So check it out. He's talking about the doctrine of Ananda, or the idea of Ananda in the Hindu religion, and he says, this ecstasy is evidently the exciting cause of the mobility of pure existence, the pleasure experienced by being in the course of events. It explains the assumption of imperfection on the part of perfection, or in other words, how perfection acquired, or why it acquired imperfection, which was this thought that fractured its unity, this becoming conscious. So the absolute would be nothing, would remain in the condition of nothingness. Therefore, in order to be conscious of its possibilities and to enjoy them, it must explore these possibilities. So I was reading that and I stopped and I thought, it's just one of those things that I always already thought, and then I find it in the writings of this person, And so I continue to read, and it says all elements must at one time have been separate. That would be the case with great heat. When atoms get to the sun, we get that immense extreme heat, and all the elements are themselves again. Imagine that each atom of each element possesses the memory of all of his adventures in combination. By the way, that atom, fortified with memory, would not be the same atom, yet it is, because it has gained nothing from anywhere except this memory. Therefore, by the lapse of time and by virtue of memory, a thing could become something more than itself, thus a real development is possible. One can then see a reason for any element deciding to go through a series of incarnations, because so and only so can he go, and he suffers the lapse of memory, which he has during these incarnations, because he knows he will come through unchanged. Therefore, you have an infinite number of gods, individual and equal, though diverse, each one supreme and utterly indestructible. This is the only explanation of how a being could create a world in which war, evil, etc. exist. Evil is only an appearance, because like good, it cannot affect the substance itself, but only multiply its combinations. This is something the same as mystic monotheism, but the objection to the theory is that God has to create things which are all parts of himself, so that their interplay is false. If we presuppose many elements, their interplay is natural. These ideas of being, thought, and bliss constitute the minimum possible qualities which a point must possess if it is to have a real, sensible experience of itself. The first idea of reality, known by the mind, is therefore to conceive of the point as built up of these previous 9 successive developments from zero. Okay, and then we're going into the Sephirah. But the point of that is that, I read the first part about the absolute and the nothingness, sustaining creation, and I stopped and I thought about this feeling that I was the reincarnation of the author. And then I start reading again, and he's talking about reincarnation in literally the next paragraph. So the reincarnation reveal is Aleister Crowley. And I'm sure, some of you guys have figured that out. And again, I want to stress that I'm not 100% convinced of this, but if you heard the whole story, you'd probably be more surprised that I'm not 100% convinced than otherwise, But, and I'm not, like I said, I'm not interested in getting into all of the nitty-gritty details here. But one of the things that I think it's important for people to consider if you're interested in this kind of thing, it's very important not to feel compelled to fulfill what you perceive to be the role of some person that you have decided you may be an extension of, because that could get you in a lot of trouble. And in my case, I certainly don't feel compelled to behave in any way or to fulfill any kind of destiny or to adopt any set of beliefs. What's really interesting to me, though, is that I already was wired in a lot of ways, very, very similarly. A lot of my ideas and my general gestalt in life, I guess, my purpose, this feeling of obsession with the metaphysical and a conviction that it's possible for us to know by our own means, through our own individual processes, through a sort of communication with the universe, and this is really important, without in a way that doesn't require the violation of reason or rational thinking or scientific process. In fact, I tend to invalidate things that I can't reconcile with a material cause, because I think that's why people fail in magic. I think that's why people get themselves into trouble with metaphysics in large part, and it's also why people become atheists and become so discouraged with their efforts at developing a spiritual dimension to their lives. They expect things to happen that are impossible. They're woo, they're nonsense, and or they experience a bit of precognition, some telepathy, perhaps they're able to confirm some memories came from another lifetime, and then they lose their reason uh, in a morass of wish demons, and thinking that their magic can do more for them than it can. Um, so it's I did not take that my own advice during certain stages of my process. I had no teacher. I had no one guiding me. And it was an extraordinary experience. I mean, I don't necessarily beat myself up for not having handled it as adeptly as I could have. I mean, I certainly have some regrets, but I think that one of the reasons that Aleister Crowley is important, regardless of, I know that a lot of people have issues with him because he's thought to have done a lot of really bad things, and people view him with a great deal of contempt and suspicion. But I think that his conviction that science and reason can coexist in the consciousness of a spiritual being is almost there aren't very many people that really embrace that, and it's also really interesting to look at the number of predictions that he made about where society was heading. I mean, even to the extent of calling World War I the Great War 10 years before it happened or something in this prophetical writing. There's a lot of just really fucking next level crazy shit. In fact, his books, one of them, the Book of the Law, is the only alleged what is it called, prophetical document that professional skeptics have looked at, and they don't dismiss it. You know what I mean? Like, they all have looked at Edgar Cayce and Nostradamus and all of these, and they're like, yeah, this is just bullshit, out of hand, just but when it comes to the Book of the Law, they say things like interesting but not conclusive, which is, they usually, they don't, it's the only case of that, that they can't just dismiss it outright because it's specific. And in the intro to the Book of the Law, he actually talks about how we would become more bisexual, more epicene. In the new eon, we would start taking one of the channeled beings, Iwas, tells him, take wine and strange drugs and know me thereof. And here we are with people smoking DMT and talking to entities that oftentimes are portents of precognitive information that's actually accurate. I mean, there's been, and he's also talking about how, fascism was going to close in from all sides, and democracy daughters ferocious fascism, cackling communism are hemming us in, the abortive births of the new eon and all this stuff. So, I mean, I think that what you have to do is kind of separate the man from the work, because, I can lay claim to having spent thousands of hours reading everything from the words of the Buddha to the Bible. I know more about the Bible than any person that I've ever encountered, even though I hate Christianity with a burning passion. Like, I mean, I get almost inflamed even mentioning it. You know what I mean? But I've really done a lot of work in that regard. I've studied all of the sacred texts and religions, and practiced all the practices, and taken all the entheogens, and you know what I mean? And I've never seen anything like Aleister Crowley. He definitely, in some ways, was far more advanced than any other spiritual teacher that I'm aware of, at least in his ability to communicate it, which makes me super uncomfortable with suggesting that I think I could possibly be the reincarnation of him, saying things like that, But like I said, before you cast judgment, you got to check out the story on the Patreon, because I just don't know what else to think. You know, I mean, I don't know what the fuck else to think. It was just a really crazy time. And you know, there's a lot of really wild stuff. I mean, Crowley lived in the late or the late 1800s, early 1900s, and you know, he knew a remarkable amount about shamanism. Listen to this passage from this book. One of the great differences between ancients and modern chemistry is the idea of the alchemist that substance in its natural state is, in some way or other, a living thing. The modern tendency is to insist on the measurable. One can go into a museum and see rows of glass globes and bottles which contain the chemical substances which go to make up the human body, but the collection is very far from being a man. 19th century chemists were at great pains to analyze opium and isolate its alkaloids, rather like a child pulling a watch to pieces to see what makes it go. They succeeded, but the results were not altogether wholesome. Morphine has much more direct hypnotic effect than opium. Its action is speedier and more violent. But it is also a very dangerous drug, and its effects are often disastrous. The action of morphine is sensibly modified by the other 20-odd alkaloids which exist in opium. So one of the things that he's saying there in his, you know, Victorian kind of complicated English is that the effects of morphine as a dangerous compound are mitigated by the, you know, there's like 2,500 psychoactive alkaloids that occur naturally in the opium resin. And so, you know, he's saying that they all work together in their natural form, and even mitigate some of the harm that is done by the isolates. White people didn't know this shit back then, you know? I mean, the action of morphine is sensibly modified by the other 20-odd alkaloids which exist in opium. The intoxicating effect of alcohol differs according to whether one absorbs it in a Richebourg 29 or in a synthetic gin. An even more startling example comes from the jungles of Venezuela, where running messengers chew coca leaves, cover 100 miles a day, and sleep till they are rested. They have no bad reactions, and they do not acquire a habit. Cocaine is a different story. The adepts of the tarot would even say, we are alive and the plant is alive, so we can make friends. If you kill the plant first, you're asking for trouble. So, I mean, that's like, you know, considering the time period and all the other stuff that this guy knew, that was a crazy passage. Let's see, what did I fold this for? I chose a couple of passages here to check out. Oh, I was going to talk about Leary too, but I guess suffice it to say that, you know, Leary was probably the biggest influence on me as a child, which, you know, it was really funny. My partner, when I said that, she was watching some Leary videos with me, and she's like, just make sure you pass that on to Nagwal, you know, our son. And it just hit me that, you know, 20 years ago, most parents would not have said, make sure that you teach our son about Timothy Leary. You know? And it totally makes sense, man. And by the way, you guys, if you are one of those people that thinks that Timothy Leary worked for the government, if he did, I'm a patriot. Like, sign me up for that government. I mean, you know, he's telling you absolutely do not submit to anyone. Someone asked him if he did stand-up comedy, and he said, well, you know, sometimes I'll rip on Christianity so hard that it might seem like I'm doing stand-up comedy, you know. And his motto, turn on, tune in, and drop out, not only didn't mean what it would appear to mean at a glance. It was a little bit more, you know, subtle than it sounds. But it eventually evolved to tune in, turn on, and take over. He called taxes extortion, referred to the American government as a mafia. He basically was advocating for like hostile, not hostile, but definitely like for conscious people to wake up and take over. And, you know, I mean, even if you guys watch the video I made about him, if the CIA is paying people to talk like Timothy Leary, you know, where can I pay more taxes? You know what I mean? I just don't understand what the fuck people are thinking in that regard. Like, that is just some stupid, crazy shit, man. Look at what Timothy Leary, like, read some of his stuff and tell me you think the CIA would pay someone to go around and tell people that stuff. It's just so mindless. It's completely nuts. maybe they just don't know what he was saying or something, but um, here's a good one. This is a short poem from the Book of Lies, so falsely called. In the wind of the mind arises the turbulence called I. It breaks. Down shower the barren thoughts. All life is choked. This desert is the abyss wherein is the universe. The stars are but thistles in that waste. Yet this desert is but one spot accursed in a world of bliss. Now and again travelers cross the desert. They come from the great sea, and to the great sea they go. There's one other bit that I was wanting to share that I think probably the most important aspect, I guess, of his message. But now I'm realizing that I folded so many pages. He's just so damn eloquent about it all, too, you know. You guys have been awfully silent. Does anyone have any questions while I'm searching through the book or comments or whatever? Oh, this is pretty good. It should be the chiefest aim of the wise to rid mankind of the insolence of self-sacrifice, of the calamity of chastity. Faith must be slain by certainty, and chastity by ecstasy. In the book of law it is written, pity not the fallen. I never knew them. I am not for them. I console not. I hate the consoled and the consoler. Redemption is a bad word because it implies debt. For every star possesses boundless wealth. The only proper way to deal with the ignorant is to bring them to the knowledge of their starry heritage. To do this, it is necessary to behave as must be done in order to get on good terms with animals and children, to treat them with absolute respect, even in a certain sense with worship. Well, right on, man. Email it to me. I have to find this, though. I know I definitely... Okay, here you go. Here you guys go. This is the best advice that you'll ever get anywhere, ever. The purpose of life more explicitly and concisely stated than you'll ever find anywhere else. Of all the magical and mystical virtues, of all the graces of the soul, of all the attainments of the spirit, none has been so misunderstood, even when it all apprehended as silence. Its nature is pure being, that is to say, nothing, so that it is beyond all intellection or intuition. Thus then, the utmost of our essay can be only a certain wardenship, as if it were a tiling of the lodge wherein the mystery of silence may be consummated. Harpocrates, the god of silence, is secretly called the Lord of defense and protection. But his nature is by no means that negative and passive silence which the word commonly connotes. For he is the all-wandering spirit, the pure and perfect night, who answers all enigmas and opens the closed portal of the king's daughter. But silence in the vulgar sense is not the answer to the riddle of the Sphinx. It is that which is created by that answer. For silence is the equilibrium of perfection. So that Harpocrates is the omniform, the universal key to every mystery whatsoever. The Sphinx is the puzzle or puzzle, the feminine idea to which there is only one complement, always different in form and always identical in essence. This is the signification of the picture of the god. It is shown more clearly in his adult form as the fool of the tarot and as Bacchus, and without equivocation when he appears as Baphomet. When we inquire more closely into his symbolism, and he's talking about the symbolism of the fool in the tarot card, the first quality which engages our attention is doubtless his innocence. Not without deep wisdom is he called twin of Horus. And this is the Aeon of Horus. It is he who sent forth Aiwass, his minister, to proclaim its advent. The fourth power of the Sphinx is silence. To us, then, who aspire to this power as the crown of our work, it will be of utmost value to attain his innocence in all its fullness. We must understand, first of all, that at the root of moral responsibility on which man stupidly prides himself as distinguishing him from the other animals is restriction, which is the word of sin. Indeed, there is truth in the Hebrew fable that the knowledge of good and evil brings forth death. To regain innocence is to regain Eden. We must learn to live without the murderous consciousness that every breath we draw swells the sails which bear our frail vessels to the port of the grave. We must cast out fear by love, seeing that every act is an orgasm. Their total issue cannot be but birth. Also, love is the law. Thus, every act must be righteousness and truth. By certain meditations, this may be understood and established. And this ought to be done so thoroughly that we become unconscious of our sanctification, for only then is innocence made perfect. This state is, in fact, a necessary condition of any proper contemplation of what we are accustomed to consider the first task of the aspirant, the solution of the question, what is my true will? For until we become innocent, we are certain to try to judge our will from the outside, whereas true will should spring, a fountain of light from within, and flow unchecked, seething with love, into the ocean of life. This is the true idea of silence. It is our will which issues, perfectly elastic, sublimely protean, to fill every interstice of the universe of manifestation which it meets in its course. There is no gulf too great for its immeasurable strength, no strait too arduous for its imperturbable subtlety. It fits itself with perfect precision to every need. Its fluidity is the warrant of its fidelity. Its form is always varied by that of the particular imperfection which it encounters. Its essence is identical in every event. Always the effect of its action is perfection, that is, silence. And this perfection is ever the same, being perfect, yet ever different, because each case presents its own peculiar quantity and quality. It is impossible for inspiration itself to sound a dithyramb of silence, for each new aspect of Harpocrates is worthy of the music of the universe throughout eternity. I have been led by my loyal love of that strange race among whom I find myself incarnate to indite this poor stanza of the infinite epic of Harpocrates as being the facet of his fecund brilliance which has refracted the most needful light upon mine own darkling entrance to his shrine of fulminating, of ineffable Godhead. I praise the luxuriant rapture of innocence, the virile and pantomorphous ecstasy of all fulfillment. I praise the crowned and conquering child whose name is force and fire, whose subtlety and strength make sure serenity, whose energy and endurance accomplish the attainment of the Virgin of the Absolute, who being manifested is the player upon the sevenfold pipe, the great god Pan, and being withdrawn into the perfection that he willed is silence. And so it also kind of strikes me that it just doesn't sound very evil. Not very evil at all. And this is what's interesting about this chain of succession of these characters, I guess. Without a doubt, Aleister Crowley was the Timothy Leary of Victorian England. And Timothy Leary was a tremendous influence on me as a kid, as I'm often saying. But I never knew that Tim Leary considered himself to be continuing Crowley's work on Earth, which he said on television once and probably did not do him any good. He was already one of the most hated men in America. And so that was crazy for me, you know, when I got older and I had all these weird experiences that suggested to me that I might be, you know, the reincarnation of Crowley, or at least that this metaphysics that had bubbled up through my subconscious existed in an identical form in the mystery schools. You know what I mean? Like, it's one of those two things. And and I didn't mention earlier that genetic biologists, I guess, geneticists tell us that we can remember, like, and I'm not talking about transference by DNA across generations. I'm talking about literal memories of our ancestors. and I'm English, and actually blue-blooded English. So it's entirely possible that I just have a common ancestor that links me directly to Crowley, and that's why I was, I just had all this information that I shouldn't have known. Um, so like I said, there's always multiple possibilities for this kind of thing. But still, when I realized that Crowley was more like me even than Leary, and then I somehow had missed Leary saying this, and it just, and I'm not comparing myself to these people in a qualitative way or anything like that, but certainly as archetypes of consciousness, we're doing the same thing, or at least we're trying to do the same thing, which is to encourage people to discover their real, deep, meaningful purpose, and to constrain every breath and every thought and every deed to that purpose in order to, in my language, in this incarnation, to resolve the crisis of purpose that is fueling the school shootings and suicides and prompting people to take all of the benzodiazepines that are causing the ocean to test positive. And this gnosis is one of the best ways, the best way of which I'm aware to achieve that for the individual and the collective. Certainty, not faith. It's a new paradigm. It's proving to be much more difficult than I. It's funny. People hear everything you know is wrong. They think you're talking to everyone else, and they agree with you. Like, oh yeah, everything you know is wrong for sure, but just not anything that I know is wrong. That's seems to be the general gist of. Oh, and by the way, as soon as I'm feeling better, because I don't mind being a little bit sick and rambling some tonight, but in the next week or so, I'm going to do an in-depth talk on the different types of what's up, Gills Beat. Definitely, if you're just coming on, you should go back and watch the last few minutes. The Crowley that I just read was just, the shit was hitting. About different types of cognitive bias, because I talk a lot about cognitive bias, but I give examples, and it's interesting because a lot of that is intuitive, meaning that I didn't realize that the examples that I gave actually had labels. There's heuristic bias, where you believe that the information you have is more important than it actually is. There's anchoring bias, which explains why with COVID, even though dude's emails, Fauci's emails, have established that he always thought that masks didn't work, and that it was a lab created virus and all this shit, and proves that he's been lying the whole time, and really vindicates Donald Trump. And again, I don't like Donald Trump, but in hindsight, turns out he was correct, and I don't see the left apologizing like, oh, sorry, we called you all idiots. Turns out you were right. I don't hear any of them. It's just crickets over there on that side of the aisle. Like, the left wing right now are all ostriches. Like, seriously, they are ostriches, all of them. They just have their heads in the sand and are just like, this isn't happening or something. But that's anchoring bias. That's the reason that whatever information people are given at first, they believe no matter what they're presented with later. And so we have anchoring bias, we have heuristic bias, and then we have group bias, which is just kind of going with the herd. And I think that one of the reasons it's important to understand the different types of bias is because it allows you to identify propaganda. Because you can see, if you understand how these cognitive biases work, and by the way, the reason that they're so powerful is that they are totally integrated into our survival instinct, because bias is everything. Sexual bias leads to procreation. Our bias against like walking on unstable ground keeps us from, like, yeah. I mean, people like to think of themselves as free-thinking. They don't like the idea that they are biocomputers, as Leary told him. And by the way, you guys, that guy was amazing. It really, like, going back as an adult, I really thought that I was gonna think he was, you know, a lunatic or something. I don't know what I thought, like, because I haven't read it since I was 15 or something, and I just couldn't believe it, you know, like, oh my God, this guy is still 10 years ahead of most of the people that are talking about this stuff now. Even though we didn't have the brain scans and whatnot to show why psychedelics work the way they work, if you look at his language, you can tell he knew. He's always talking about reprogramming circuits and how psychedelics allow us to rewire, you know, any kind of neurological aberration. And it's just really incredible, you know, and also just to see that the level of demonization, and speaking of propaganda and bias, it's like, in order to diffuse Leary's influence, they actually managed to convince everyone that he was a CIA agent. And one of the things I've noticed about conspiracy theorists in general is that they're actually regurgitating more of the propaganda than anyone else. Most of the stuff that they think they have uncovered as, you know, sleuths of conspiracies or whatever is actually the propaganda. And so they become mouthpieces for big business and the elite that they think they are exposing. The climate change is a great example of that, where they are actually, they have become puppets for the very forces that they think they are battling against. Yeah, well, it's really artful what they've done, you know. And I hesitate to talk about this stuff, but I'm going to. This is, by the way, has become my channel to just say whatever the fuck I want. It's gotten me in a lot of trouble. I've lost a lot of money. I've been demonetized. My Facebook account was deleted. I mean, you guys know the story. So I'm starting another channel with a new email because I have been banned from AdSense. No, man, didn't you read the thing? I'm sick as hell, dude. It's not COVID, but it's close, you know. In fact, I'm rather impressed that I've done so well so far tonight. This has been the longest live stream in terms of my experience ever, though, and it's only been 34 minutes, I can see. What was I talking about, though? Oh, the new channel. So please do me a favor. Continue to hit the like button, share, subscribe, support us on Patreon or PayPal or Zelle. There's an email in the description and in the chat for those. We have a Cash App. We really do appreciate your support because we've been demonetized, and due to a whole bunch of other crazy ass circumstances in our life, we are pretty much entirely dependent on social media for our income. And people like Fernando that have been extraordinarily helpful. I have to blow my nose though. Give me a second. Okay, so the way that it looks to me is that I don't think I blocked you. Oh, because I got deleted. Yeah, no. The way it looks to me is that they have kind of like shaken up truth and falsehood and the propaganda and cast it like 50-50 on each side of the aisle. So if you identify with the left, you're wrong 50% of the time, and if you identify with the right, you're wrong 50% of the time. And that way, there's no possibility that the two sides are really going to like come to any kind of homeostasis, because they're both fed equal parts disinformation and truth. You know what I mean? So, but what I was saying is that really understanding the different types of cognitive bias really proves that the narrative that we've been fed is propaganda. Because if you understand the psychology, it's really easy to see why you were given certain information at certain times. And just the whole structure of it, it really, like I'm always saying, truth is self-substantiating. And in this case, an examination of the various types of cognitive bias, and then an examination of the narrative and the timing of it should establish to any reasonably intelligent person that this has been a bunch of intentional mindfuckery. And now, in order to take it a step further, they're talking about a new type of lockdown over climate. So now suddenly, like, I mean, come on, you guys, that's a coincidence. Like, for the first time in history, we have been locked down in our houses all over the globe. Let's ignore the fact that that lockdown came amidst global disruption, right? Like, there were protests in France and Venezuela, and the United States was starting to boil over. Yeah, you're talking about cascarilla. I do. I went to the Quechua market this weekend, and I got. It's called 24 plantas. It's just 24 plants. Here, the Quechua in particular, they take a lot of pride in their knowledge of mixing plants. It's not just like with the Shuar, it's just about the plants. Like they know how to do things with plants that are more advanced than medical science. That and some of it was acknowledged to be the case by, you know, mainstream medicine. What would you say? The most I guess extreme example is the snakebite plant. I can't recall the name of it. These languages down here in the Amazon are very, very difficult to speak, especially Shuar, I think is probably the strangest. Quechua is not too hard. Ayahuasca is a Quechua word. Icaro is a Quechua word. Chuchawasa is Quechua, you know. It's not too bad. Shuar is a little bit weirder. Warani, actually, that's crazy. It sounds like straight up aliens. Yeah, well, I'm doing my best, dude. But I went and I got some of the 24 plant mix. What I was saying is they take a lot of pride in their knowledge of mixing plants, the Quechua here, and the plants catalyze each other to create effects that oftentimes rival what's possible with modern medicine. And the snakebite plant, I was saying, is the best example of it. Oftentimes, in cases where they would amputate at the hospital, the Shuar are able to give a concoction made from this plant to people that have been bitten by, say, a fer-de-lance or something, and dos Equis, they call them here, and no amputation is required and the person's fine. So, where were we at? Let me look through here. So I noticed a bunch of you have dialed on. You missed the reincarnation reveal. I would really encourage you to go back a few minutes after we're done here and check out the Crowley that I read. But the reincarnation reveal was Aleister Crowley. And you know what? I'll tell you guys a little bit of the story just to give you an idea of what happened there. Again, I'm not gonna, you know, I already did this in a 2-part thing on my Patreon, so if you're really interested in hearing the whole story, you can sign up for our Patreon, and also the ceremonial plant video, the first, it's getting late, so it may be tomorrow morning, but we've definitely finished. The first is going to be how to incorporate the tobacco into the ceremonial practices, but we are integrating the sacred plants of the Amazon into like hermetic magic and our practices of things like the lesser banishing ritual of the pentagram. And I'm also teaching how to use, for example, the lesser banishing ritual of the pentagram to establish a circle for the purposes of having an ayahuasca ceremony, but also how to invoke relevant ayahuasca spirits instead of like the 4 archangels. We're going to talk a lot about psychoanalysis because you guys, actually we're going to divert from the Crowley thing. I'm not going to tell you the story. I'm going to tell you something more important. Psychoanalysis is essential if you are intending to engage in the practice of consciousness expansion, whether it is through sacramental plants or ritual magic or both. There are a lot of risks and there are a lot of pitfalls and snares, and ego inflation, for example, is something that is almost unavoidable, especially for men. There's this process that almost every alpha male I have known, including myself, goes through, where it's like you realize your divinity, but you think you are like literally the most high guy God incarnate, like specifically you. It wasn't that bad with me because I'm very good at maintaining the rational, skeptical part of my mind. But I mean, I know so many people that went through this to like way crazier extreme for way longer. It seems to be just part of the process. But you know, there are things that you can do to kind of minimize the fallout from these kind of experiences. Also, to be prepared for experiences like the dark night of the soul, because what is going to happen invariably, whether you're using just psychedelics or meditation or ritual magic to expand your consciousness, you are going to create a situation where more of your brain is communicating with itself than normal, right? So your subconscious and conscious mind are having a conversation now. So suddenly you're shining the light in all these places that you have refused or have been unable to in the past. And so, you know, I've seen a lot of people, especially the older you get, I think the more difficult this is. There are definitely people that I know that I have tried to show them that they have been totally unaware of their subconscious being and totally in denial. And then when I prompt them to confront it, they'll just turn on me because that's easier than confronting this or overcoming the selective perception that they've very carefully cultivated for however many decades, right? So one of the best ways to mitigate the impact of all this is through psychoanalysis. So I'll give you guys an example from my own life, and it's got a lot to do with the situation I'm in currently. And I have mixed feelings about it because obviously I have a son and a partner that I love very much. And it would almost sound like I'm saying that I regret that. And that's not what I'm saying, but I am saying that I invested 20 years of my life into something that was extraordinarily improbable and just walked away from it right at the moment of success, like in the midst of it, you know, not like it was about to happen, but, and I'll explain to you, let me just lay it out on the table, right? So I left Virginia, and this was way before the movie What the Bleep, before this idea of consciousness somehow having some kind of hand in compelling the chaotic energy of the universe to crystallize in symmetry with our will, right? This was not a popular idea yet, but I had, you know, the only suggestions of it that I'd really gotten were from like Robert Anton Wilson, who I am very sad is kind of forgotten. I think he's one of the great psychedelic luminaries. I would put him way higher than Terence McKenna for sure, without hesitation. Much more important for me, at least. He did kind of talk about this, but other than that, it was something that I had just kind of, I had just become convinced of it through his long series of events. And so I basically decided that I was going to go out to the West Coast and I was going to either play with members of the Grateful Dead or people associated with them. But I wasn't going to do it by the normal means. I wasn't going to go and record stuff and then market it and hope to get, you know, kind of famous myself and then contact, you know what I mean? Like the way you normally would. I let it all develop organically, and the circumstances that surrounded it actually materializing were far more strange than I even would have anticipated. And it did actually happen, and without really any effort even on my part. I mean, the magician has to work with ingredients that are available for his cauldron. And so I put myself in the right places to a certain extent. But beyond that, I didn't really do a lot to like consciously create these situations, except for the intent, right? And so it was a hell of a, I mean, it was hell to get to the point where I was at when I left. I was on a conversational basis with Phil Lesh, the bassist from the Grateful Dead. I had just missed jamming with Bob Weir, the rhythm guitarist. I was working with one of the drummers from Weir and Phil's bands, the drummer from Primus. You know, I was just like starting to really realize like something's about to happen. In my own band, I had found this prodigy bass player. It was absolute like legitimate genius. It was, I'm still, other than him, I've never seen any or heard of even anything like it. And so in the midst of all this, I hadn't seen my mother in like 8 years, and I went to Ecuador to see her and drink ayahuasca a bunch of times. And while I was here, she committed suicide. And so now we have to rewind and go a little bit back. Psychoanalysis on the self involves determining what influences converged to create our idiosyncrasies and our proclivities, and it's just basically analysis. And so my mother was severely abused and certainly mentally ill. Of course, I didn't know that until I was an adult and I had been exposed to people that weren't mentally ill because we were very much isolated. And so, I started to realize that I had this self-sabotaging complex. And I traced it back at first to this. I was a Boy Scout. I was maybe like 6 years old, 7 years old. And my father and I had built this soapbox derby car, and I was winning the race, and I couldn't believe it. And right at the finish line, I just jumped out of the car, and I have always done that. It does not fail. And so that was the first step, to realize so I realized that I had the self-sabotaging complex because of something that had happened more in the present, right? So then you start going back, you start tracing it back, looking for earlier and earlier and earlier, following the invisible thread back to causality, right? And so the earliest thing that I could come up with was that jumping out of the soapbox car. And then I thought, okay, well, so what is this about? It's self-denial. You're not worthy. And I realized that it had some kind of thing to do with not deserving, and then it hit me. And I remembered my mom screaming bloody murder, like red in the face, when I asked if I could have some ice cream from the gas station. We were like driving on the road, and she's like, "You don't deserve ice cream." And I'm like, oh shit, I was probably like 4 or something. And so the reality is that my mother was very poor. She was a single mom. She was completely insane. So we didn't have any money. We actually didn't even have plumbing in our house or bullet holes in the windows. Like my babysitter's shooting at people in the front yard one time. And, I've told you guys a lot of this stuff. Like literally our neighbors were inbred and couldn't read or write, like feeding their pit bulls gunpowder. So we had to like really watch our asses walking home, had to get a black belt just to survive junior high school. Carrying a gun, by the time I was like in high school at all, I'm sure, we were all in the honor roll one time, and then it was like in the newspaper that the principal somehow coerced the teachers into admitting that we were passing us with good grades because they were afraid that they'd get shot, so really, really rough. And that's kind of a diversion, but the point is that I did trace it back to that causative moment, that moment when I took that imprint, "You don't deserve." And I realized that after the fact, right? Because here I am talking to members of the Grateful Dead. I'm playing with the musicians that are associated with them. And this is like this impossible dream that I had left the East Coast to prove, in large part to my mother, I think. But just in general, that consciousness had, that we could create our reality and that we could do incredible things, and, this whole thing. And so I just walked away from it when she committed suicide and came down here and just stopped right in the middle of everything. And then today, what reminded me of it is that I got online and I saw at Phil Lesh's club, there was like 3 or 4 people, and Bobby and Phil were like playing to no one in the backyard. And I realized that if I had stayed there, there's absolutely no question that I would have at least jammed with one of them by now at these informal jams out behind Terrapin Crossroads. And that in and of itself would have proven my point. I didn't need to get like super famous or have any, you know what I mean? Like that really would have been plenty to make my point. You know what I mean? Especially the way that it all came together with all of these crazy synchronicities. And you know, I've made some videos about it. The Skeleton Man video you guys can check out if you're interested in the story. The Phoenix process, I think I talk about some of the crazy synchronicities that resulted in it all. But what I'm telling you is that my psychoanalysis, my mindfulness practice, even though I had made so much progress in these ways, that I was able to manifest this super improbable, nearly impossible dream under ridiculous circumstances. I had not adequately made the transactions that would have allowed me to transcend the trauma. Because what happens when related trauma occurs, like to trigger PTSD, for example, it will trigger the response, right? So this undeserving thing that came from my mother, I mean, she killed herself after we had a really bad argument. So, and by the way, you guys, if you have someone in your life that has narcissistic personality disorder, I don't care if it's your own mother. And I know this sounds cold and callous. You have to cut them out of your life. I mean, that's what the psychologists and psychiatrists tell you. My brother cut my mom out of his life a long time ago. And this is why. Because, you know, it wouldn't have allowed her to do that to me, to set me up. You know, like she knew she was going to kill herself before I came here. Like absolutely for certain. So, you know, she had in a way sort of planned to saddle me with this guilt. And it's like I had just gotten to the point in my life where I had gotten the drugs under control and I had overcome all the trauma that she instilled in me more than any other person or influence. I had just started to heal from it all enough to make the dreams come true. Hadn't seen her in 8 years, come down here to Ecuador, and she just levels up like God mode, guilt ball, you know what I mean? Saddles me with like and that of course triggers the self-sabotaging, you're not worthy trauma, and I walk away from my band and my dreams and everything and just go hide in the jungle. So I'm just making an example of myself that it doesn't matter, the most complete set of talents and virtues is totally useless in the absence of willpower and discipline. So, and you can extend that to say that your knowledge of self, your how successful you've been in your psychoanalysis, you know, I mean, totally go see someone to help you with it. But that's part of the Ritual Magic course as well, to talk about psychoanalysis, because it doesn't matter the rest of it, you know. I mean, you can master the lesser banishing ritual of the pentagram. You can learn to sit in the dragon position with a saucer full of water on your head in a very shallow plate for an hour without spilling a drop. You know, whatever. To concentrate on a top va without any variation for 30 minutes straight, to get your pranayama cycles to 40, 30, 30, 40, you know, whatever. Doesn't matter. If you still have a neural net for self-sabotage, it is still going to engage at exactly that moment, you know. So I'm just trying to make it very clear as well that if you do take up my course or these practices from anywhere, as long as they're, you know, as long as it's solid training, they work. And you're going to find yourself with an expanded and enhanced capacity to influence your reality, to manifest your will. But if you haven't worked out your stuff, it's just going to, you know, I hate to be redundant, but the Mickey Mouse Fantasia scene with the brooms where he gets himself in over his head, that's what's going to happen. So, you know, the psychoanalysis and stuff isn't as glamorous and it's more tedious than the ritual and magic and the taking of the ayahuasca and stuff, but you can't have one without the other. I mean, I might as well have just never accomplished these things. You know what I mean? It almost would have been easier, because you're just left with this frustration and disappointment. Although I'm not dead, and it's very inspiring to see, you know, the bass player is still willing, and if we can get it together, I'll go back to California, hopefully sooner than later, and we'll take another swing at this shit before I am laughably old and, you know, so that's it, you guys. I gotta go because I gotta edit videos for you. And again, remember, oh, have you guys seen the monkey video? 8 million, 9 million, 9 million views on TikToks. 20,000 followers in 4 days. So let's see how much money let me get a calculator. 10 million views times 20,000 followers times 970,000 likes times 0 equals $0. You know why? Because I live in Ecuador, and it's an exploitation economy and opportunities to make money. The only accounts that can be monetized, are in the 10 richest countries in the world. All the rest of them don't qualify for monetization. And it's not just TikTok. Like Shopify shut us down when we came here. They do it on purpose. I really think they do. The countries where they need people to be working for $10 a day, boxing fruit and harvesting minerals, rare earth minerals and shit, they are not able to get paid by Shopify. They don't get paid by TikTok. They don't get paid by YouTube. Like, all these ways that they could improve their lives they just don't apply to them. So I might be able to get a VPN and change and fool the algorithm, and hopefully I can make another viral video. But we would have received $800 if we lived in the United States, where people don't really need the money. So that's cute, right? So do me a favor and hit the like button, share, subscribe, support us on Patreon. I might do another live stream tomorrow, and then I'll definitely... Fernando, I've heard that might not work. People say it doesn't work, but I don't have a SIM card, and it said that if you don't have a SIM card and you have a VPN, it might work, but also the views have slowed down, and I don't think they pay you retroactively. So the 9 million views or whatever, I've already, I won't get paid for that. So good night, folks, and we'll see you again very, very soon.